put your hands together for Leland Carina.
The first time I played with Mel, I wasn't actually sure if she was going to be able to top me. I was 29 at the time, and I was in the best shape of my life because I was playing roller derby. And she was older. She was 52, about 6 inches shorter than me, and from my point of view, possibly a bit frail. I mean, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that if I wanted to, I could knock her over with one well-aimed hip thrust. But I'd been looking for a Dyke daddy for a long time, and she was definitely a daddy. For those of you who don't know, a Dyke daddy is like a female version of a gay leather daddy. Usually older, and sometimes the age is relative and imagined, but usually older, caretaking, a parental figure, but a very sexual connection, usually, with a younger woman who is girl identified, such as me. So that first time we played, I kind of stood in front of her, feeling really tough, and just daring her to try to top me, you know? But she sat in her chair, she spread her legs wide, she took a deep breath, and a smile spread across her face, and she let me have time to drink in her really hot leather chaps, and her leather boots, and her leather vest. And then she just simply said, "Take off your dress, little girl." I dropped my eyes, I started playing with the corners of my dress and turning my toe in. I felt little, and I loved feeling little, and that was what made her daddy. Her ability to make me drop into that little girl place with just something as simple as a turn of phrase. Suffice it to say that our play session went really well. She spanked me, she paddled me, she even made me come just by caning me with a bamboo cane on my ass to raise welts. She took me to her hotel room that night, but she didn't have sex with me. She made me wait for that. I have always aimed to please. I have always sought validation, and I've always been a very sexual person. Even at 4 or 5 years old, I remember getting a sexual charge from a slip that I wore. It was a slip just like any other little girl would wear to church under her dress, but when I put it on, I just felt so sexy. And I remember one time my mom was out and my dad was watching me, and I put it on and danced around my room and went downstairs after bedtime to say something to him. I approached him. He was looking very intimidating, reading, and he was just like, "What do you want?" And I said, "Dad, do I look sexy in my slip?" I remember that he took a long pause, and his face turned really red, and he said, "Honey, you're too young to be sexy." Now, in hindsight, of course, I'm really glad that I was around adults that had good boundaries, but at the time, I was devastated, and I remember running up to my room and throwing myself on the bed in tears because I felt so rejected, and of course, I didn't really understand what was happening. Well, I told that story to Mel over dinner, and she wasted no time in letting me know that this daddy would think that I was very sexy in my slip. And she asked if I would wear it the first time that we had sex. Her suggestion made my breath catch in my throat, and soon after, we made plans. We made a date, a sex date, and I was really excited, and I dutifully wore my slip. And when she came over, I asked her if I was sexy, and of course, she told me I was a very sexy little girl in my slip. Tapping into that actual memory made me drop so hard into my girl space. She also made me ask for everything I wanted, and it was so hard. I mean, I had called her daddy casually over the phone, when we'd played even, and at dinner, but nothing could have prepared me for what it felt like to use that word during sex. I remember she made me ask for things, so I said, "Daddy, will you please touch me?" But she wanted me to be even more explicit, and so As she asked me to do that, I got more and more bashful and more little, and all these phrases that I hadn't used for years started coming out, like, "Daddy, will you please touch me down there?" I was so turned on, and my body was ready for penetration, and she had her strap-on cock out, and she knew it. But I couldn't bring myself to ask for that, so she said, "It's okay, just say, 'Please, Daddy.'" So I screwed up my courage, and I said, "Please." And when the word "daddy" came out of my mouth, she penetrated me with her cock for the first time, and it was the most compelling sex I had had to date. It was the dirtiest, and it was the hottest I'd ever been, and I had tried a lot of things by that time in my life. So I was very committed to the dynamic. I even got the words "very, very good" tattooed on my arm, which is to say that it was really my thing. I was really into it. So imagine my surprise 3 years later when the dynamic that I loved so much seemed to turn on me. I remember pleading with her, "Mel, can we just try to have sex without the age play? I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I don't feel like you can see me that way. I'm not a child." She agreed. She said she'd be willing to try. But the next time we had sex, she had her cock out, and here came the familiar refrain, "Hey, little girl, do you want to suck on my lollipop?" "Mel, right there, that's age play. You promised me that we could try to have sex like two normal adults." She'd say, that's right. Sorry, baby, let's try this again." So I'd go down on her, and I don't know if you've ever sucked a strap-on cock, but when you're not into it, it's not that great. I just remember her shoving that lifeless piece of silicone into the back of my throat. And I was just thinking about all the times that I had happily gagged on her lollipop. And this was not one of them. I was just going through the motions, and I suspected that even though she said she was trying, she was still imagining me as a little girl. So the time came when we sort of faced an ultimatum. I remember asking, "Mel, is there ever going to be a time that we can have just adult sex? Like, I just need a break from the age play during sex. I still want you to be my daddy. I still want to be your girl. I love you." And I'll always remember what she said. She said, "I want a girl that I can fuck. I can't see you any other way. I've tried." So we broke up. And the combination of feeling sad and angry as an adult about the breakup, but then also feeling rejected and abandoned as the little girl that I had inside of me, was much worse than a typical breakup. And I kind of vowed to myself at that moment that I was going to hide that part of myself from then on. I would still bottom. I would still let people beat on me because I enjoy it. But I was going to be really strong with my boundaries. I was going to tell people I don't do age play and I don't identify as a girl. Even though it wasn't true, there still was a little girl inside of me, but she was just really broken and feeling incredibly toxic. So, as luck would have it, a young girl of about 21 approached me and asked me if I would be her daddy. I remember thinking it was crazy at first. I'm a femme, I'm not a daddy. Just tried to put her off. But she begged me. She said, "Leland, you would be so hot as a daddy. I want you to be my daddy." And curiosity got the best of me. She was adorable. I wanted to play with her. And she finally pinned me down by saying, "Can we just try once? Can we just do one daddy girl scene and see how it goes?" So I said yes. I showed up in my leather pants, my leather boots, my leather vest. And she was wearing a frilly little white dress. She was petite, and she had dark hair and big eyes, and just really played the part well. And I remember sitting there, looking at her, feeling like it was one of those full circle moments. And I just said to her, "Take off your underwear, little girl." and watched her drop. She got very bashful. She took her underwear off and waited for my next command. I told her, "Come here and straddle my leg. I want you to rub your little girl parts all over my leather, but you better ask me permission before you come." She followed my instructions. She climbed onto my lap. She parted her lips and put her clit directly on my leather. And then I watched as she worked through her own embarrassment to conjure that innocence and to really get into that and rub herself back and forth. And I leaned back and I thought, it's really good to be daddy. This kept going until she finally said the words, "Please, Daddy, may I come?" And that word daddy directed at me pulled my heartstrings, and I said yes. And she moaned and came and squirted all over my lap, which was not something she'd warned me about, which was beautiful, though. And I leaned in and said right into her ear, "Thank you, little girl. Now get down there and clean it up." She got on her knees and licked my leather till it was clean. So 10 years went by. I played with lots of butch boys and lots of girls. I was daddy, I was sir. But if there was ever a DS, dominant submissive dynamic, I was always on top. But something happened over those years. Something happened watching all those boys and girls conjure that innocence and holding that space for them in a way that hopefully felt safe for both them and for me. Was that I healed my own little girl through being in that space. So much so that just a little while ago, I started feeling my inner girl peeking out and wanting to play again. I can't tell you how vulnerable and how terrified that made me feel. There's a new daddy in my life. A few months ago, we were in bed. She had listened to all of my stories about where I had been and what I had experienced, and she asked me the most amazing question. She said, "What could I do to make your little girl feel safe again?" And in response, I took her hand into mine. I took her thumb and I looked up into her eyes with big, innocent eyes I don't usually have access to. And I pushed her thumb past my lips and into my mouth and started sucking it. And we locked eyes, and she watched me drop all the way into that childlike space for the first time. We stared at each other over that imagined age gap, and it was very powerful and beautiful. And even though I know that my girl might get hurt again, after looking down into the eyes of boys and girls for years, I finally feel like I know how to take care of her myself.